the Gran Turismo movie?
Yeah, that one that hates gamers, right?
It's the one. Well, the other night on Discord, former guest of the show, Kay, brought to my attention that the full title, like the full name of this movie, what it's actually called, is Gran Turismo: based on a true story.
No way.
Yes.
Yep. And it is based on a true story, so they're not
kind
lying.
of, depending on how you feel about the way they handled that fatal crash or whatever. But look it up. That's the craziest fucking thing.
It's like if you say it enough times, it becomes true. Like, I don't know, they say it into a mirror maybe, like based on a true story, based on a true story, based on a true story.
Yeah, but I want to know if somebody anywhere like went up to the box office and asked for a ticket for...
Yeah, one grandmother.
For Gran Turismo based on a true story.
Could I get one adult and 3 kids for Gran Turismo: based on a true story?
There's no way that's what she's taking her kids to. Her grandkids.
Well, they already saw Barbenheimer.
Yeah. Oh, all right. Yeah, now we're talking. So it appears our story is not yet over. For last time, we covered the strange cinematic experience, speaking of movies, that was Capcom's live-action adaptation of its historic fighting franchise, this in the form of its wonky production, mixed reception, and the cult-like effect it had on the industry. However, there is still a largely forgotten piece to this mishandled puzzle that I would be remiss if we didn't discuss. 2 or technically 3 video games based on, not a true story, based on what we saw aptly titled Street Fighter the Movie, or colloquially, Street Fighter the Movie the Game. Colons all over this thing. I know, Austin, you're saying we got to call Street Fighter the movie the episode,
and then Street Fighter the movie the game the episode. Yeah.
Such a good idea.
Well, it's Street Fighter the movie the commentary, then Street Fighter the movie the episode, and then Street Fighter the movie the game the episode.
and go listen to those if you haven't yet. But so we have this is going to be the movie the game. One for arcades and one for at home. You needed that, right? Can't expect the film to go in alone without its buddies by its side. This is the multimedia era, damn it, at its its finest. Which is why today we are going to step out of the theater and into the living room to educate you all on a tale that was running parallel to our ridiculous previous episode, the development of the series' black sheep of the SF family. What went wrong? What did we think? And most importantly, how did they recover into getting such a valuable IP back on track again? This is Hot Button. I'm Randall Beatrice, joined by Austin Blakesley. And in person, Andrew Banks.
Tatsumaki Sabukyo!
Our Street Fighter experts. Also, don't worry, this recording won't be nearly as long. Think of this topic as a sort of bookend to our prior outing, a bonus for the listeners who perhaps have some memory of firing this up on their freshly acquired PlayStation 1s when Ridge Racer and Rayman weren't enough to keep the friends at their sleepover occupied. So, who's ready?
I would be surprised if there's no mention of cocaine in the script after the last one.
Yeah, there might be some a mention of cocaine. Huh? So we're back to the early 90s. Hollywood's out there doing its thing, burning dollars. This while our Eastern gaming publisher is duking it out with Midway's Mortal Kombat, as well as its endless clones.
Yeah.
There was...
War Gods.
Killer Instinct.
Well, that wasn't a clone.
It also wasn't out yet.
Tattoo Assassins.
Tattoo Assassins.
Didn't Tattoo Assassins not come out?
Right, but
Way of the Warrior.
Way of the Warrior.
It was promoted.
Fight for Life.
Mm-hmm.
One was Bio Freaks. I guess that's after.
That was
later, yeah.
But yeah, they're
not a single Street Fighter clone in sight. Street Fighter. Nobody ever tried to make a new Street Fighter.
So this was a war for market dominance. Sprites were out. JPEGs of digitized real people were in.
I mean,
Whoa.
you can't get more
Decided.
real than real.
Whoa.
Yeah.
TIFF files, probably.
Oh, sorry.
Come on. That's not true. They were compressed to shit.
And not that it would last. This was as far as Street Fighter goes, this was their only crack at an entry that used photographs rather than original artwork. But due to this, it was interestingly kind of cemented its own legacy. Of course, that legacy was a botched attempt to breathe new life into their once guaranteed moneymaker. There was actually a lot riding on this. As I hinted in the opener, it was destined to be a system seller, launching as part of the OG lineup on the PS1 in September of 1994, at least in the North Americas anyway. And this and the Saturn version weren't ports either. They were separately built from the ground up by different studios than the one in arcades. And securing the funding proved to be tougher than its silver screen counterpart. The concept was even deemed too high risk by Capcom's executive producer, Yoshiki Akamoto, and illustration group head Akira Yasuda. Nevertheless, with a bit of convincing, they went forward with it. Although Senior Vice President of the USA branch, Joe Morisi, stated that the general discomfort from the Japanese headquarters for Capcom led to the US team to take control of the arcade portion of the endeavor. Specifically, a Chicago-based company called Incredible Technologies, previously Free Radical Software. And I know what you're thinking. No relation.
Yeah, they would have predated it by a few years.
Yeah.
There was a big arcade development scene in Chicago, so that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, Midway, Chicago, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting. He said they had a hard time gathering funding here, and I'm just thinking about, like, inflation adjusted, Street Fighter 2 made like over $10 billion. Without adjusting for inflation, it made over $1 billion for sure.
They were happy to throw that into the movie. But
that's what I mean is, like, movies didn't even cost anywhere near that much back then.
No.
And so, man, it's like you could have funded any video game on earth for how much money Street Fighter 2 raked in.
Yeah.
But
no, I think it was more about how, like, because they were splitting the work between the two, like, having the American side do the arcade version and having the Japanese side do the console versions, that it was like there could have been a bit of favoritism in that, or they're just maybe just a distrust, like, in the North Americas, that, like, they haven't really, as far as fighting games go, this is kind of, or maybe they just associated us with Mortal Kombat. I don't know, maybe there's some internal, like...
Yeah, I mean, Mortal Kombat was made in America.
Yeah, I mean, it couldn't have been as stupid as, well, they did digitized sprites in Chicago for Mortal Kombat, so what if we did digitized sprites for Chicago for Street Fighter?
Maybe that was the...
Hopefully they had a more informed decision than that, but...
So, Incredible Technologies, they were founded out of a basement in 1985 by married couple Richard Ditton, a NASA engineer, and Elaine Hodgson, a biochemist. It's interesting. Beginning with releases for the Amiga, Atari ST, and the Epyx, like EPYX.
Epyx?
Fucking with a Y. Stupid.
That's a video game platform?
It's probably like a PC platform, yeah. Before pivoting to work for hire jobs, including a handful of Data East pinball tables. Struggling to maintain profitability, they were eventually able to keep themselves rolling through a collaboration with Capcom in '88 on a trackball bowling cabinet. A year later, they saw success with the debut of the Golden Tee series, giving them that confidence with their licensees. Except they were a small staff, then consisting of just 32 employees, with only half of them being game devs. The other half were primarily accountants. The MK-style graphics, though, were going to require cameras and a room for pictures, something not everyone had access to.
I'm sorry,
and they did.
Audio listeners are just not going to get the face that I just made. That, how do you have a company that is half accountants? Wait, no, are they doing accounting for somebody else? They're not just accounting for their own employees, right? Because that's like...
you hire one accountant per employee.
But I mean, it's like, that is hiring as many people measuring the thing that they're doing as it is doing the thing. Like, they must be doing outsourced accounting, right? Like,
I don't know. This was from the a Polygon article. Maybe it's like they just mean like business people, like money people. But then
it would make more sense if they were like salespeople or biz dev people, or not necessarily accountants.
Money men.
You only need a couple of them, if that.
I'll dig it. Maybe there's a mistake somewhere, but
or maybe they just hired a bunch of accountants to do all the rest of the work.
Oh, maybe they all came from like.
It's like, okay, I know you're a CPA, but like you're HR now.
Yeah.
You're the janitor.
Yeah.
You restock the vending machines.
So according to that exhaustive rundown that I mentioned from Polygon, this is from a 2021 piece. It was shoot, did I not have the name here? I probably have it at the end. Apologies to whoever on the Polygon staff. I normally it's up front for me, but this was quite the mission to get this shit onto shelves. The contracts with the movie's cast were there. Meanwhile, Capcom just merged their business allies, GameStar, into a combination group known as Capcom Coin-Op. Incredible Technology still doing the bulk of the heavy lifting, of course. Not that they were jumping into the task totally blind. They even proved themselves in the world of fighting games under the Strata brand. Your Time Killers and Bloodstorm.
Okay,
there it is.
Almost thought that was the joke came from The Simpsons for a sec.
Bone Storm.
Bone Storm. But that didn't necessarily make them an ideal fit. In fact, Hodgson recounts that the deal came from a trip to the Capcom office where she was proposing other projects for their own catalog, when upon recognizing the skill set they used in their library of sports titles that featured the transferring of photos, their executives returned with the pitch for this instead. IT needed the income to stay afloat, so she accepted, even crediting Street Fighter as the reason Golden T3D saw completion. Now, this wasn't designed to be a replacement or a sequel. It was meant to entice us in the West away from the competition that was Mortal Kombat. Quote, they were doing this movie for an American audience. They were looking to us to be more Americanized. But
we're Americanized in Chicago, baby.
I mean, that just this.
Fuck their pizza.
Look, maybe there's a little prescient, right? But it's like a kind of a foreshadowing of what would go on for years as far as what Japan thinks America wants versus what they're actually seeing results of what we really want now, right?
Yeah, and then now turns out what we actually want is just shit from Japan.
Yeah.
So
I mean, shit from Japan that isn't boring, or like whatever. Like there's examples. It's like, oh, okay, yeah.
Listen, Japan's never boring. Inappropriate, yes. Fucked up, yes. Boring.
Well, I mean, like sometimes you come across stuff that it's like so Japanese that you're like, how am I supposed to relate to this? And other times you're like, oh no, we really just wanted you to be yourself rather than trying to put this character that we all knew for years into some gritty American military uniform or whatever, right? Like,
yeah.
Don't talk shit on Bomberman like that.
Yeah, the Xbox 360 Gem Bomberman X-Zero.
I'm just saying, what happened to Chris Redfield? I don't know.
Hey, I take that over the Shadow the Hooch Edge.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. So basically, they were being commissioned to square off with them toe-to-toe here, Midway and Williams, who had more resources and workers at bay. Incredible Technologies, ironically, had way less superior tech at hand and were known for doing things quickly and affordably, but they did have the drive. The overall attitude, however, was already a tad muted. Chris Kramer, a PR rep from Capcom USA, recalled an instance where he made an unfortunate comment on Usenet in regards to the product's expectations. Not that it was his intention, though, but it still came across as a slight at the game's potential quality in comparison to, a Street Fighter 2. Which was sort of tragic about his post was that the higher-ups couldn't read it. Unbeknownst to him, the devs could. So this caused those close to the project to meet up with him in an effort to prove him wrong, prove everybody wrong, that this could hang with their mainline entries. All while elsewhere, MK2 was now tearing it up, and 3 was announced. Like that used to be quick.
I want to make a joke about it's like, oh, we need a follow-up to one of the best-selling, most popular fighting games ever made. I mean, the grandfather of the genre, essentially.
Yeah.
What about the people that made the bowling game that went well? But I think...
Well, that's why I don't think they cared. This was just meant to be like your Burger King toy for the movie.
Well, but hold on. Don't discount people like that, because then years later, Microsoft was like, we should make a new Killer Instinct. Who do we get? How about the people that made the Buffy the Vampire Slayer game?
True.
And then cut to one of the best fighting games of the past decade comes out.
Hey, and as far as the movie, it's like, the GoldenEye hadn't happened yet. Like a rare, it's like Get the Donkey Kong
original-
Country guys to make a Bond.
The original Mater's a Killer Instinct.
Yeah. Killer Instinct was 90. Is that 94?
That's 94.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Same.
It all
same
comes
here.
full circle.
Yeah. Moving further into the early stages of development, the IT crew flew out to Australia to visit the movie set. Take notes, take pics, make sure everything was in harmony in terms of it being a cohesive, like it. It was not cohesive. Well, it looked like it as far as tie-ins go.
It's called doing their due diligence.
Yeah. Problem was there were already a few hiccups. First and foremost, they were short-staffed and light on time. Only 5 of them to be exact.
Wait,
as
how many
far
of them
as
were accountants?
Did they send? Were you saying?
Yeah.
Accountants?
You're the photographer. My degree is in mathematics. I don't care. Go to Malaysia and take pictures of Jean-Claude Van Damme doing cocaine or whatever.
So their company's 32 people. They sent 5, 2 being the founders in charge. But they were cool. Elaine Hodgson later giving many compliments to the designer Alan Noon, art director Ralph Melgoza, and manager Leif Marweed. Noon and Marweed taking care.
Leaf Moreweed?
Leif.
Cool name.
Leif. I think it's Lev. Leif.
I like Leaf Moreweed better.
Him and Noon taking care of the choreography with the models, as Melgoza was behind the camera to capture the necessary assets needed to build the actual gameplay. The equipment used were rentals from back home, so they had to be extra safe. It also wasn't a job that could be done in a day. Therefore, they stayed close by in a hotel just miles away from the Warner Brothers building in Brisbane. In order to get the shots, they constructed a blue screen area next to the special effects warehouse. Melgoza was absolutely joyous to be around the film props and sets. They were even permitted to hang with the cast whenever, partake in their catering, and it was neat to see them treated so well compared to what you often hear.
Yeah, they're
with this field.
catering. Just touching my nose for the audio listeners. Jean-Claude Van Damme did a lot of cocaine. Listen to our last episode if you want to know more.
So the plan was to be in and out in a matter of about 2 weeks. Simple. Except after meeting with the costumed performers at a meet and greet dinner, the then president of Capcom, Kenzo Tsushimoto, made the mistake of pointing out just how huge the Street Fighter name was and how big this could be commercially, like the game. Which, in retrospect, is obviously hilarious, but then questions began to arise around the table when it came to royalties for the product. This is in front of the actors. Like, they signed on for the picture and likeness in toys, not video games. And even if the movie flopped, its interactive counterpart, had it be a slam dunk, or so they thought anyway.
Pull up the lawyer accountants.
Yeah.
So, I understand that in a lot of cases,
There's no,
a video game
precedent for this.
a video game release might count as a toy. So
That's what I was going to say. In the early 90s, that was legally ambiguous whether video games were
Very true.
software or toys when it comes
you
to those kind
remember
of
in
rights.
our ESRB episode, they're like, what is a computer, or what is a game console? And they're like, well, game consoles don't have keyboards, and a computer is needs a monitor. It was just so
Yeah.
well,
it's like I
My
think
computer's got a printer.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so does the Game Boy.
what I remember hearing
SNES is a mouse, what
what I remember hearing in the not too distant past was that there was that the arcade 1-up cabinets that come out, and it was the only actual release of Marvel vs. Capcom 2 in a long time, right?
Yeah.
10 years. And I think it's because or at least speculation was mostly from Maximilian Dude. I don't know. I'm not personally familiar with these kinds of contracts, but was that the reason why that arcade cabinet could come out was because it counted as a toy, and they were allowed to make X number of them. And that's why it's so they don't have to relicense a lot of things.
I thought that was probably with the
license.
Simpsons one, cabinet as well.
I mean, it's all of them, yeah.
Yeah, so look, I don't know that there's necessarily any royalties owed, but I don't know. They need an accountant lawyer on that one.
So everyone started murmuring, and then this meant further negotiations had to happen for increased pay to the actors before anything in regards to the game could even start. And this like it does propose an interesting issue. These were the early days of when virtual performances weren't yet comparable to film, television, or theater, and no system was in place legally to assure those protections and compensations. So when you have somebody in such a powerful position proudly boasting in front of everyone, like just how successful their business is, their brand, like millions this and millions that, and even if by accident, it creates a conflict with those actively participating in something that they won't in turn receive $1 for.
I mean, I've been at work functions where maybe some of the people higher up in the company had a little too much to drink and started talking about how much money they made.
I was thinking about that. That's interesting because for our listeners, if you would like to know about what it's like when voice actors strike, we have an episode on that.
Yes, we do. Yeah.
But they are part of SAG, technically, but they are not the main part of SAG.
What is a screen?
It's a collection of pixels lit up by some light source, and then they have like a liquid crystal panel, and then there's glass in front of it, and then like a transparent
light bright. Yeah.
It's like
Light
that.
bright.
Yes. But like, so SAG striking with the AMPTP is not the same as SAG striking with the ESA.
Yeah.
They're different contracts in the same way that like voice actors for cartoons and anime are kind of just fucked. But like so there's a SAG strike going on right now, right? And like if you're in a movie,
I'm sure it'll probably still be going on by the time this is out
let's
there.
use an example. David Harbour is in as we talked about Gran Turismo: based on a true story. And he can't promote it because of the SAG strike.
Yeah.
David Harbour also in the Alone in the Dark reboot coming out in October.
Yeah.
And we don't know if the SAG strike will be going
He
on
can go on
in
his press
October.
junket tour for,
But can he go on a press junket for Alone in the Dark? Because he's part of SAG, but they're not negotiating with the ESA. Just food for thought.
No, that's interesting.
And I wonder if like actors having nothing to do right now, like if game companies are trying to take advantage of that with any games they have in development.
But we won't know the results of that in like
for
a few
years.
years.
Yeah, because I'm sure David Harbour didn't do his Alone in the Dark thing last week.
Yeah,
It's been in the works
response
for
to-
years, right?
Yeah, you're
But
totally right.
in like 2026, there'll just be like a bunch of very famous actors in video games that get announced because they're like, there's a SAG strike.
Oh man, I can't wait for the next Crime Boss game. We'll see what city that's in and who's in that game.
Yeah.
I was gonna make a joke.
What
about
other cities are there? Is like there's Rockay City, and then what's the rest of San Andreas?
I was gonna make a joke about the DLC pipeline for Dead by Daylight.
Yeah, how'd they get Helen Mirren for Dead by Daylight? That's wild.
That might actually get me to play it.
They would get like Susan Sarandon.
No, it was what's her name? Because she was in a whole bunch of horror stuff.
Jamie Lee Curtis?
No, she's probably already in there for all I know.
That's probably true.
Anyway, so this was a very wait a minute moment that caused various cast members to have to step away and contact their agencies. This was 2 shoots now, not 1.
The fun thing about that way the legal system works, though, is that you can like work on the game. You just don't. Like they're like they have to figure out the contracts before they start. You don't have to. Who's gonna catch you?
By the books.
Yeah. You can start your work ahead of time and just like don't document it until you.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if they would agree to it, but.
Oh yeah, I guess they would be working for no pay because Capcom wouldn't be paying. Yeah, okay.
And this led to a hell of a delay to get it all sorted. 2 weeks became 6. A budget became more budget, et cetera, et cetera. Thankfully, our publisher fronted the bill as the IT squad patiently waited and watched the magic of filmmaking in action in what they described as tedious looking.
How are you going to make the money to cover this? We put another Street Fighter cabinet in fucking LA. You were fine.
Sorry, you're saying the developer covered the costs to
No.
do...
Capcom, the publisher.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought you were saying that the people they outsourced to covered the cost because I was
fuck no.
this sounds like a bad idea.
Yeah, that would be. No, they're literally just like chilling and watching the all the takes.
They're playing golf as research for Golden Key.
Yeah, microphones under cars.
Yeah.
So
yeah, they're just sneaking onto golf courses with mic packs and just.
The benefit of this is that folks got to know each other better. Hodgson vouched highly of Ming Ya Wen in particular. She said she never wanted to be away from her children this long, but that none of the resolving of the royalty situation was in like bad faith. It was just an honest oversight that needed amending. Sorry, I omitted a share of these bits from the last episode. They just felt more appropriate here.
Do you think that her children are more happy that their mother was Mulan or Chun-Li?
Neither. It's the what's her Aki Ross from Final Fantasy: The Spirits
No.
Within.
No.
Melgosa continued to tell a couple more amusing anecdotes from their stay in Aussie country. The atmosphere, definitely an improvement from Bangkok that we spoke on prior. That's when everybody was coked and crazy and getting massages.
Massages.
Yeah.
Big air quotes around
Yeah.
massages.
Yeah.
They're just men. They need their massages, Randy.
Yeah.
A lot of tension. All kinds of places. Yeah.
Yeah. Tension in certain places. There's a certain part of your body where all the limbs come out of.
Mm-hmm. So he joked about Damien Chapa, Ken, slowly trudging along on a treadmill eating a Snickers bar during training.
Dude, it's my hero.
He also grabbed food with Grand L. Bush and went clubbing with DJ, or Miguel A. Nunez Jr. Clubbing with DJ just sounds better, though. Yeah.
Aren't we all clubbing with DJ? You know what I mean?
A couple of our champions didn't show up to their blue screen room, though. Wen and Greg Rainwater had to do their photos in Chicago after, perhaps due to scheduling. It was unclear. The rest went fine. Hodgson said Van Damme was unique in that he requested live playback of his sequences so he could view his moves in real time and witness precisely how it would appear in the game, to which they obliged, as according to her, he was by far the most physical of those on the roster, like the most like fit, like doing easily just jumps, kicks, splits, whatever they needed, all that jazz. He'd flip around so wildly, probably the cocaine.
What?
That they'd even have to scrub Marweed out of the pictures. Like he'd go too far and then he'd get.
You tried doing Guile's flash kick without stimulants. You know what I mean?
Usually,
he did that all by himself too.
Marweed would be the guy holding and guiding the actors as they did their routines, and he just like ended up in the background.
I probably couldn't do Guile's flash kick on a trampoline. You know what I mean? But also, it's like,
But what if you were on coke on a trampoline?
Oh, I'd be doing the EX one every time. For sure, yeah. Which I guess we'll also get to. But
Yes.
so is Van Damme on or off cocaine? Doesn't really matter. Is he the do your own stunts kind of actor? Do you know?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. That was around the same era as like your Seagals and your like who's another Jackie Chan,
Chuck Norris.
So Elaine was happy.
By the way, Van Damme, like the least Republican out of all of them. So
Yeah,
there you
who
go.
thought?
Oh no, Jackie Chan's a lovely dude.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Right, you said him. But fuck,
He's a
fuck Chuck
shining
Norris
star.
and fuck
Agreed.
whoever else you said.
Seagal.
It's like Steven Seagal. Yeah.
He sucks. Art director Melgosa, however, he thought Van Damme was, quote, an asshole. you just said he wasn't, super conservative. He still might be a prick. But this was...
Oh, yeah, for sure.
This was also, remember, in the middle of his, like, divorce and, addiction. Like, I don't know. I think he's maybe lightened up since then, but...
I don't know. He sounds kind of cool to me.
Apparently, while VD was squaring off with Raul Julia's stunt double for their ending fight scene in the movie, the devs were sitting on the sidelines and watching, and the guy's his hat kept falling off. And after the third ruined take, he frustratingly yelled, "I'm not coming back until you staple or glue his hat on his head." And I get it. Like he just made a larger deal of it by hunkering down in his trailer and getting drunk for an hour and a half.
I mean, I guess,
Sick.
Yeah.
I'm sure it could be frustrating to have to constantly like cut, reset, everybody take
Yeah,
it
their
again.
hairpins exist, though. You don't have to staple the hat to his head. Seems like a bad idea.
Other than that, attention was mostly drawn to his infamous ego. Marweed knew how to schmooze him as a fan, so they were able to get the right shots. And they weren't the only ones either. Two different video games from two different developers also meant two different teams. See, Capcom Japan was leading the PlayStation version of the title. Then they had sent their own employees to record separate photographs for some reason. Originally, they were going to piggyback off the same space that Incredible Technology set up, but then everybody correctly came to the conclusion to just allow them to share gear. I don't know.
Yeah.
It didn't make any sense. So it's possible the Arcade Edition's move lists weren't intended to be one-to-one. Regardless, Melgosa found their presence daunting, partly because of their direct connection to the parent company and partly because of the miscommunication on design philosophy. Each group likely having their own idea of how the attacks would work, how the special powers would be integrated. The concept for things to be Americanized didn't vibe with traditional martial arts. And the Japanese studio took notice and were unpleased. Remember, like, in the filming of the movie, they're like, we don't want, like, any of the supernatural stuff. And then, but that's in the game, both versions of the game. Like, it's...
Yeah, so in fact, as you were painting this picture for us, I was imagining that it's like, yeah, Capcom and the the execs and everybody in charge of, like, the brand Bible, if such a thing existed in the mid-90s. And everybody showing up to make the video game. They're like, okay, we're gonna take these pictures. We're gonna see Guile do his flash kick. We'll just do another take for the video game, and then we'll wrap it up. And then, what do you mean there's no flash kick? What are we taking pictures of? Like,
yeah.
I'm sorry. Wait, hold on. There's no Shoryuken? Oh, that little spinny thing that Ken did. That's all we got to work with. Are you...
That's a really good point. They probably got there like, what the hell is this?
What do you mean Honda's only got 2 arms and he doesn't have 6 of them on screen at once when he mashes the punch button? How are we supposed to work with this? I don't know. This is what it sounds like to me. It's based on how you've just worded that, it sounds like everybody showed up and said, "Oh, we are expecting these special moves to be here," and everybody was expecting to be able to make the video game off of them. Yeah.
Why is Chun-Li's dress red? But they persevered, and the dynamic improved enough for everyone to wrap up getting their images. Richard Ditton even got Ralph Melgoza a cake for his 30th birthday to celebrate before the long flight home. That's cute.
That's the wild thing about game development in the 90s.
Yeah.
Is like this American studio from Chicago who made like a bowling game and Golden Tee. They're like, yeah, these are the guys that made Street Fighter 2, but like, I got different design philosophies than them when it comes to making a Street Fighter game. It's like, what do you... If Capcom hired somebody to make an offshoot of Street Fighter now, those people would never say a goddamn word to Cap. They wouldn't be like, nah, we could do this better.
All right, so we're now going at the point where they actually had to put what they had collected together into a functioning video game. The boring stuff. No, and let's focus on one product at a time here, beginning with the Arcade Edition. Couple quick details. There was a push to differentiate itself from SF1 and 2 in many ways. There was a greater emphasis on juggling air combos. You could now cancel a special move with another special move. And then there were 2 exclusive characters. Or I think they each had 2, according to my notes. So that's where we'll get to that in a second. But yeah, certain fighters can deflect projectiles, with others were centered around charging.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
You know that.
I only noticed that when we started fighting the computer, but not when we were fighting each other.
Right.
I was like, no, wait, what is the point of this move? I can't hit anyone with it. And then you go against the computer, you're like, oh.
And we should explain, right, we all sat down with all 3 of these versions last night, so it's fresh in our minds.
Yep.
Just now we've got like direct experience. So the method for grappling was reversed, along with the player having the ability to escape throws or perform a counter. There were new interrupts following a block. I know this is like technical. But this is what they had in this piece. A comeback mechanic was added, which can only be used when your health gauge is in the danger territory, which would later return in alpha. I think maybe, I don't know how much of these are all of them.
So how much we're familiar with?
I know.
Based on what
I know
we
this is
played,
like very specific, but
so I mean,
it's what the fans care about.
Yeah, well, based on what you've covered so far, right? Like, I didn't notice special canceling, but I also didn't know to look for it.
Yeah.
I did notice that there were some moves that sort of automatically made air combos, and the other thing we noted too is like we were also looking at games that were coming out around the same time, even
Yeah.
from Capcom. In fact, especially from Capcom, we were looking at
Yeah.
like some other games that were coming out around the same time as Street Fighter the movie, the game, and Street Fighter Alpha and Street Fighter 2 and whatever. And right around this time would have been the release of X-Men: Children of the Atom. And
That will come up.
well, and starting with
Yeah.
that game, and you know, the later on the Capcom versus series, you know, like X-Men versus Street Fighter, Marvel versus Capcom, whatever.
Yeah.
There was a large emphasis on air combos. Like, you know, it would call it out with like a voice and say air combo, like whenever you got it. So it doesn't surprise me that they were starting to think about it already for this game. And yeah, some of the special moves would automatically like launch you and catch you in the same one. So I guess if I really knew what I was looking for, maybe I would have been able to get a
guess
little
I'm,
bit
like,
more fancy.
I'm
But
afraid of like stating like, oh, it originated here, and it might not have, like apparently there was a regen system or a regeneration system that to restore your life mid-match, and that came back in succeeding entries too. I don't know if this was first.
I didn't notice that mechanic at all.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they don't tell you like or telegraph anything.
Well,
like,
well, so you know, one of the other games we played last night was Darkstalkers 2, and you know, the Darkstalkers games, especially Vampire Savior, which would be Darkstalkers 3, they make it very visible on your health bar that there's a part that you can recover if you take the offensive back, right?
Right.
Tekken 8 is going to have a mechanical out like this too, but it's like there was nothing on the UI that indicated that to me. So if it was there, I don't know. Maybe you had to read the manual.
Right.
But
This is the that came with the arcade.
Yeah.
Maybe it's painted on the side somewhere.
yeah, on the marquee. Yeah.
Moving on to the broader features, there's a 14-level solo campaign ending with Bison. Was that the one that began with Bison and you're meant to lose, or was that the PlayStation?
In the console ones.
That's the
but-
console one. Okay,
yeah,
sorry. I'm
so
trying to-
when we did the arcade mode, the
Yeah.
arcade game, it started with a Chun-Li fight every time.
That's right. It doesn't make any. It really tricks you into thinking it's going to be like you're just going to be playing out all the fights from the movie that happened and those characters, but it kind of doesn't. I don't know. We didn't make it
I
through all that.
mean, arcade games typically just have an arcade mode where they just pit you up.
Yeah.
against
But
random
but
fighters.
what's interesting is that if you beat it, it unlocks a secret tag team mode that changes the format to a type of Marvel vs. Capcom thing.
Huh.
Yeah.
Huh.
I don't know if there's a way that we could have
I'm gonna
unlocked that ourselves.
I'm
yeah,
gonna well
without
dude,
having to.
Yeah, if we were gonna try to unlock it, we would have been
I
there
meant
all night.
No,
but
I didn't
yeah.
mean manually. I meant like depending on who you choose for the story. Didn't it just? Did we get to choose?
You get a character select
okay
in the arcade in an arcade mode. It's an arcade mode.
No. In the arcade, well, the
yeah,
solo
this didn't
campaign.
have a story. This didn't have cutscenes. It's just an arcade.
Right. Sorry. We played these both back to back and like
Yeah.
my brain. Okay, so and depending on who you chose, a closing sequence of promotional stills advertising the film would pop up, complete with text describing their fate or Speaking of the roster, there were 14 main heroes and villains to pick from. Forgetting the palette swaps. So there's no Fei Long, who wasn't present in the movie, but also no DJ, T-Hawk, Dalsim, or oddly enough, Blanca. Which is really bizarre considering how much screen time that had. But
because Dalsim's in the movie but doesn't fight and definitely doesn't
Yeah.
fight as Dalsim, but Blanca is very much in the movie, very
Totally.
much fights and is a central part
Yeah.
of that movie.
So,
yeah.
supposedly he was dropped last minute as being a playable fighter, as so the leftover data implies. So I don't know. But Akuma was offered at the start, who was not in the film, and then two more characters created for the movie are present as newcomers: Sawada and Blade.
Everyone's favorite.
Yeah, the latter having multiple variants. Same with your S Bison in there, but and this is also the lone Street Fighter release where Western names were used for the various fighters. The actors are credited, presumably due to that late contract dispute. With the unfortunate exception of Julia, as he was no longer with us by these stages of production. Instead, his stunt double, Darko Tuscan, was cast as a result. Some outfits were retooled to resemble the previous entries as well. To get technical again for a sec, each human model had around 600 to 800 digital frames of animation, totaling 32 megabytes of graphics. This cabinet was also
We are still talking only about the arcade version.
Yes, correct.
Because that is an important thing to distinguish when we're talking about how many frames of animation there are.
Yeah.
Go on.
This cabinet was also rocking 256 colors over, 2's measly 16 and MK64. And we're on top of that. As the project was reaching bug testing, a couple interesting questions arose. First, what would it even be called? Alan Noon noted that there was a brief moment the game was codenamed as Street Fighter III, partially because of the language barrier between them and the Japanese office. It just made it easier. Quote, I distinctly recall that originally during the pitch process, it was billed as such. And he wasn't alone in the confusion. This caused Capcom's USA Public Relations Associate, Chris Kramer, that I mentioned before, to post to Usenet. Once more, he loves Usenet, to clarify to those in the community that this was not, despite the reported rumors. Of course, years later, Noon would find a design doc with the words Street Fighter 3 on it, making them repeat the phrase in interviews, but I digress. The actual Street Fighter 3 wouldn't see light until, was that?
97.
97. Okay,
But
so that's
even-
still some time away.
Even still, like that's totally true. The Capcom was like, well, how do you follow up Street Fighter 2?
Mhm. Yeah,
And
yeah.
there were all sorts of projects that were potentially Street Fighter 3. I mean, we were talking about this last night. They
It's
churned
like
out
Resident Evil 4.
they churned out like 30 fighting games in 10 years.
Yeah.
When after they made Street Fighter 2, they're like, okay, guys, hit the ground running, right? Like
Yeah.
this is where the money is. There's gold in them hills, but it's still a gargantuan task to call anything Street Fighter 3.
Oh, yeah. No, for sure.
The game that eventually became Street Fighter 3 did not start life as Street Fighter.
Oh, that's funny.
So yeah.
Well, meanwhile, Elaine Hodgson, Katsuya Akamoto, Akira Yasuda, Takeshi Tezuka, and Hideki Itsuno always knew that this was never intended to wear that banner. Akitomo stating that it would have obviously been a far larger job in terms of scope and resources if that was the case. A sequel to Street Fighter 2 wouldn't have been subcontracted out. Ralph Magosa's response to this, and one that makes the most sense to me, was that it was just a local internal development name. He also chalks it to a major pivot in direction early on when the movie script that was sent to them was totally different than what we saw. Just describing the plot as more in line to a Ken and Ryu buddy flick, one who did things honorably and by the books, paired with your then, unconventional partner who plays by their own rules.
Oh, that would be Ken, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Honestly, that
Either way, it wasn't actually Street Fighter 3 material. But.
it sounds closer to what Street Fighter is than what the movie ended up being. But
What, like a Bond movie?
that's one way to put it. Yeah.
Ryu loves rules, but he's like so bad at following them because there's like 6 evil versions of him.
The other thing I know Ryu loves doing is arms dealing Nerf guns to terrorist groups. That's his other favorite pastime.
But there is a violent Ken from CVS.
Yes, Violent
Yeah.
Ken. That was the name I couldn't think of.
Violent Ken, Evil Ryu, Kage. There's probably more.
Akuma was supposed to be an evil version of him at one point, I thought.
Maybe
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
could be true.
Outside of the silly naming debacle, Incredible Technologies, they were able to pretty much silently stick to themselves for the majority of the game's development. Capcom had their PS1 and Saturn versions to stay busy, and all those other fighting games that you mentioned, Andrew. So interference was fairly hands-off for the team.
Cyberbots. It's a Capcom fighting game.
Yep.
That's also in that last collection, right?
yeah.
That with Red
Earth.
Earth.
Red Earth.
That is maybe
War-
the 4th time you've asked me this week. Yeah, it's
Because
Red
it's
Earth.
such a yeah.
Wargrave. Isn't that one of them?
Red Earth has a different name in Japan.
Okay, that's
Okay.
the Red Earth in Japan.
Yeah, yeah.
There were disagreements among the staff on whether to make overall Control feel in family with the classic iterations of the franchise or to mimic Mortal Kombat's ideas on input methods. These, however, were settled in studio without the need to bother our publishers overseas. While occasional visits from GameStar and Capcom reps would happen, and for reference, these types of check-ins nowadays are like daily or weekly. It wasn't the case back then. But it wasn't until the title was nearing gold status that a group of from Japan's division, the very same who were sent to Australia, would fly over to Illinois to take a look at what they had. And it was evidently clear that they weren't entirely thrilled. There was Akamoto, who was the artist and advisor, Akatomo, who's a programmer, and Yashuda, who is the head of illustrations, like the art director. They would settle in with the developers for a month to give them guidance and suggest adjustments. There were updates to the pixel renderings of the actors, balance tweaks, hitbox changes, and none of these were small fixes. Yashuda claimed that Akatomo was especially angry with the American trio, genuinely believing that this wasn't going to sell. The misunderstandings when it came to communication didn't help. Akatomo knew his English wasn't the strongest, which was funny since he was formerly assigned to be their interpreter. But he was determined to get the project where it needed to be. Akamoto, on the other hand, was apparently labeled by his own coworkers as being quite the abusive dick to everyone, making inappropriate jokes at the expense of the IT employees and undermining them. Quote, he was constantly harassing the people around him, the kind of behavior that today would probably cause a lawsuit. And that was from Akatomo directly, his coworker. Yashuda even saying that Akatomo had to downplay his bullshit during translations, which then just pissed that dude off even more, because then he couldn't be understood. It was getting heated. Like where we're at, the shipping build is practically done. The time for requests that messed heavily with the code or art any further had long passed. So Akatomo's frustrations were essentially pointless, which, by the way, he was pretty much the single standout person in this whole episode who declined future interviews to explain himself and give like his personal take on the experience. So
the dick.
Shocker. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Everybody else was more than willing to talk.
Yeah, at that point, if you start saying, like, no, here's what really happened, then all you're going to do is get more people to remember other lousy things did.
That's a good point, actually. That's not how I recall it. So Yashuda was inserting some tiny improvements here and there, but still feared the end product wasn't fun. He just had a better fucking attitude about it. Elaine just let it roll off her back. She was aware that it maybe wasn't what they wanted, but, fuck it. It was their game, and they stuck to the core mission given to them. The forced collaboration trucked on. Okatomo's antics continued. Akatomo, he was the cooler one, referring to Akatomo as Loki in retrospectives.
The god of tricks.
Yes, yeah. He did have his defenders somehow. Daryl Williams of Capcom's Coin Op said his demeanor, as well as forthrightness, was in part to their dedication down to the most meticulous factors. Remember that their publisher was probably the most respected third party in the world at the time. Capcom, hell, even right now, to a degree, they might still be my favorite. Not that there were any occasional misfires, stupid fucking Exoprimal this year.
They had the reputation back in the day, I'm told. I've only heard this on hindsight, but I've heard that people back then called them Cap God because they were on such a winning streak back then.
There you go. I'm trying to think of who else. Konami was but it's certainly not in the fighting game scene. That was ruled by Capcom and almost exclusively up until Mortal Kombat came onto the scene. But Ralph Melgoza thought the tense atmosphere was simply an intimidation tactic. She may not have been wrong. You've got this underdog Western company hired by this massive Eastern one, and he didn't seem to hate Okatomo as aggressively as several of the others did. In contrast, he actually sort of dug him. Melgoza said he was outgoing, creative, and eager to get his messages across, acting through gestures when he couldn't explain stuff audibly. The sheer amount of effort was inspiring to him, even it came packaged with the rudeness. Towards the final days of their trip, Elaine and Richard wanted to leave things on positive vibes and tried to patch the relationship up with their visitors by inviting the three of them over to their place to hang out. However, this friendly attempt soon failed when they got exposed to the wealth the couple had earned through their contributions to the industry. Not being aware of their modest past, Yashuda was basically like, we fucking are the guys that did Street Fighter 2, this gargantuan hit, and these folks are living in a mansion with a giant basement, a 200-inch projection screen TV, a whole separate game room. The luxury of it all instantly turned to jealousy. It just rubbed them the wrong way. They thought they were flaunted, and they too would become rich themselves years later after. But as of this date, little money was actually seen by them from their success. I don't know how residuals were, but back
probably
then
non-existent.
Yeah. Apparently they that those three guys, like they went back to Capcom and threatened to quit until like altogether before their raises were granted.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it gave them the
bargaining power.
Yeah. Like,
No, I mean, like that's a good point. And I don't remember what.
Well, I just meant it gave it also like implanted the thought like it toughened them. Like, yeah, they're like.
No, for real. Always know your worth when you do something like that,
sure.
right? Like it's like so. Yeah, I don't remember if Capcom in particular was necessarily guilty of this back then. There's a good chance probably, or they would
every studio
they would like change their people's names in the credits to like try to avoid them getting poached and stuff like that. I mean, that was common enough that again, can't say for sure that this is what Capcom did, but it's like, yeah, if you made a game as lucrative as Street Fighter 2 and you know that your contributions to that make you irreplaceable, right? Like,
and then when you go chill at the bowling guy's house, you're like,
yeah, they're like, wait a minute, I should be making bowling games.
Yeah,
but
Hodgson joked that this was the house that quote Golden Tea built.
No, that's fair. I mean, how many bars have you been to that didn't have golden tea?
Yeah, that was so big for a while. It was either that or what's the deer hunting?
Big Buck Hunter.
Yeah, Big Buck Hunter.
It's those two.
Yeah.
If it's a dive bar, it's got one of those two games in it. Or it did. Anyway, it's probably all been replaced by, something that skirts up to the line of gambling
Touch Tunes.
now. Yeah.
It's funny because in this like moment in time, that house, that mansion, like it was collateralized to the bank for a loan to get assignments like this out the door. So they probably didn't know their home was.
You're saying it was designed to be showy to present success.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. But it didn't do it the way that they intended. I think maybe there's a separation in culture. Like if you're trying to like act, that way to a local partner or investor, they'll be like, oh, they're good business people. But it's like, I think to these guys, they were just like, they thought it was like a dick measuring contest. I don't know. It was, but this was more personally motivated. Like that couple, like they just wanted to extend an olive branch a bit. That's all. And they weren't required to host anything. This wasn't during work hours, but it was what it was though. The crew returned to Japan. Melgosa really just found the contradictory nature of the meetup befuddling. 1 minute they're given total freedom on the project, and the next they've got people peering over their shoulder asking about every element they could. Williams remembering an example where they sat at his desk to literally edit the sprite of a fireball. Not that it bugged him in the slightest, but it was strange to like swap what people's roles were or who was in charge, and like just taking a liberty or initiative to just be like, I'm gonna like.
It's hard to work toward a thing that has a finished state when you're changing who was doing what on the fly. Like that's absolutely frustrating. I get it.
So meanwhile, Melgosa began to wonder if they were being set up to lose. Like this was Capcom's baby. An American studio waltzing in was bound to step on some toes. It's a prospect he could sympathize with. Luckily, they kept it cool. No bad blood, not on their side at least. Our Japanese producers didn't particularly reflect on those weeks as a victory as fondly. But which brings us to their development of those aforementioned PlayStation and Saturn versions. Thanks to you again, Andrew, for getting all this stuff. But first,
and all on the legit hardware and copies of that hardware.
Yeah, I can't believe you found an actual arcade machine of that.
Yeah, it was really heavy.
Carried it over. Yeah,
I know. Yeah.
Brought it on a train. That's wild.
I know. Yeah.
So we are now familiar with each of them, which we should say their availability in 2023 isn't the easiest if you don't have the proper.
If you don't have an eye patch and a peg leg. Yeah.
That's good. And I should also state, as we have often discovered in the past of researching topics, that unearthing well-documented stories of foreign game production, specifically Japan, is extremely difficult. So this section will be significantly shorter. But the goal was for both to make their public debut in summer of 1995, 6 months after the film's release in the United States. The actor sprites did indeed come from those shared photo shoots with the cast, although these were processed differently because of their respective hardware capabilities. This led to completely changed backgrounds, audio, UI, of course, plus the combat system, most importantly. In fact, these console variants are regularly described as being more in rhythm to a Street Fighter II Turbo than that fancy cabinet Intelligence was making. I don't know how much we agree, but that was the consensus that I
Yes
found.
and no.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes and no. Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll get to it. There's a
Yeah.
discussion part coming up.
Yes,
But yeah.
there is. There were even pieces of Darkstalkers built into it, such as the super specials, where a player had to they had to combo gauge at half or higher to pull off an unlimited number of attacks using 2 buttons.
An EX move. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Street Fighter 3 Second Impact would include this by 97 too. There were 4 main modes, a solar campaign titled Movie Battle, where you would assume the role as Guile and recreate the plot lines of the movie through branching paths of fights determined by your choices. Remember, I mean, they're always binary. It's just 2.
It's basically just a better NetherRealm story mode,
Yeah.
really. Yeah, everybody would.
God.
Because
Yeah,
NetherRealm...
they could learn something.
Yeah, they don't give you any choice in those stories at all, and this one did. And yeah.
We checked that out during our session. I don't know how far we made it.
We made it like 3 fights in on one of them.
Upon defeating Sagat, Bison, and Final Bison in a single match, we have to look this up. You'd be greeted with a music video of the song "Something There" by Chaj and Asuka, a Japanese folk duo from the motion picture soundtrack. I guess they went with them over MC Hammer.
You couldn't get Ice Cube for the game.
Yeah. Also, there was Street Battle that tests you with beating 12 AIs at random as any character, that you wish to fill the shoes of. Versus for local 2-person multiplayer, and Trial Mode if you wanted to go against the entire roster in order for a timed high score. A roster that wasn't 1-to-1 with its arcade counterpart. Blade was gone. Pour one out for Blade.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
It was real. I was so disappointed.
Sawada stuck around.
Took out my main. What am I supposed to do now? I gotta change characters.
Yeah, Blade was my favorite because he just threw knives. And his feet had knives, and his hand had knives. There's a lot of knives.
I didn't have this in here, but you reminded me when you were talking about throwing knives. There's like blood splat, like that's like just to make it more Mortal Kombat. That's not in other Street Fighter games.
No,
I remember
Street Fighter
seeing
games
jarring.
you don't kill
Like-
people in Street Fighter. You
Yeah.
knock them out.
Right. Yeah. It says KO.
Yeah, that's what I'm
No
saying.
fatality. Yeah.
Nobody gets hurt. No bones broken.
That's right. In Tekken, they always have that animation where they fell on their keys. So that way they're all like, "Oh, my back!" Because they're like, "We don't want you to think they're dead on the ground there." So they always go, "Oh no, my back!" Every time, every single time.
What's the Jackie Chan fighting game? He gives you a thumbs up.
Yeah.
It's like in Street Fighter 6 when Ryu cocks his hand back and then flexes his muscles so hard that all his veins pop out and then punches you in the stomach and then goes up and knocks you in the chin and sends you flying 12 feet in the air. Nothing breaks.
No.
You just
No
knocked
blood.
out,
Which
which
You
also
just go to sleep for a little bit. Yeah.
yeah, which also isn't like a dire medical situation in and of
Yeah,
itself, so it's
uh-huh.
fine.
So no Blade, along with that Bison Trooper clone, I forget. Akuma was back as an unlockable hidden behind a cheat code. DJ and Blanca returned as well, albeit with Blanca now recast as from Robert Mamone to stuntman Kim Repia. And Darko Tuscan once again having to fill in for Julia. But this rounded out to 12 characters, 2 less than what we us Americans delivered. Otherwise, there was still
USA.
Yeah.
USA.
There's still plenty of DNA between them. Voice samples had to be localized or whatever. I guarantee there's like a fan run wiki somewhere that lists everything. But let's fast forward to the launch and reception of these turkeys, since all that's really left for me to present is that it went through certification, got rated, and thus was officially named Street Fighter the Movie. Both of them, or the 3 of them, if you toss in the Saturn port. Not Street Fighter the Movie, the game, as it's forever called to avoid confusion.
And also because the title is so dumb that you have to say it that way.
Yeah.
So.
And an issue that remains their fault.
Street Fighter, the movie, the game, based on a true story.
Wait. In Japan, it's known as Street Fighter: Real Battle on Film.
That's better.
Yeah.
That's better.
Yeah.
That's so
I
dumb.
take back my USA chant.
Supposedly, this was to distinguish itself apart from an unrelated game based on the anime of the same title. This
Which
fucking
is-
industry is terrible with names. It kills me
Which is
because that is also called
battles it out
anime.
in my research for worst Street Fighter game ever made.
Mm,
Which one is that?
The Japanese one that's based on the animated movie.
Yeah, but what's it
I
called?
never played that. I think it's.
Street Fighter the Animation, I believe,
Oh,
is the
okay.
English title.
What does it look like?
Shit.
What was that on? Was
I
it?
have no idea.
Oh, yeah, like what platform?
I'll have to look that one up.
Yeah.
Also, Street Fighter 2010.
Oh yeah, that is a thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's like the Bomberman Act Zero of Street Fighter. Yeah.
So we've made it to market. Race on over to your nearest arcade spot or retailer and relive the joy that you likely didn't even see in the theater considering the box office results. According to what old reports I could find, physical units of the cabinets, the ones with Van Damme's flexing mug slapped on them, were shipped out to venue owners mid-June of 95 worldwide. And the PlayStation and Sega Saturn copies landed on Japanese shelves 2 months later in August. All while our region here, along with Europe, would get those in September. The slight delay presumably being so it could be sold alongside the PS1's very, very anticipated release.
Street Fighter, the interactive movie for the PlayStation and Sega Saturn also came out in 1995.
That's worse. Man, they're prolific.
That is, and it is also apparently an FMV game?
What?
No, that's not. That's
Oh, like
wrong.
animated FMV or filmed FMV? No,
Animated FMV.
Okay.
Although the sprite for Ryu it looks like, to give you guys and our listeners some description, it looks like somebody took the backgrounds. It looks like they took Street Fighter the movie that we're talking about
Yeah.
and just slapped sprites from Street Fighter 2 on top of it. and also the health bars.
Let's see.
You're making
I mean,
a face.
Yeah, it definitely just looks like. I mean, like I don't recognize the character Cyborg. But
Whoa, Cyborg's there?
but the UI and the characters do just look like they're from Street Fighter 2. Yeah,
But
with
the
there's a
background, the
Let me see this
backgrounds
shit.
don't look like Street Fighter 2.
Oh, weird. That looks like a fan, like...
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, it's like this is a
It's like-
Mugen.
Yeah, it's like a Mugen mod.
Yeah, how are these received? And don't worry, we'll get to our opinions after. I bet you guys are just dying to let those words out, the listeners at home.
Yes.
Andrew's itching, I can feel it. So the best word I can use to sum up the Arcade Edition's launch is quiet.
Perfect. Perfect.
Sorry, yeah,
Yeah.
one more time.
Okay. I have to record that in order to use it. I'm just gonna do this now.
It is quiet. Not that games
What?
in this format ever get as much reviewing as home system
because-
stuff does, but
It's because when it's in demo mode, it doesn't make any noise.
That's
yeah,
true.
I know.
That was why it was quiet.
Yeah, I was curious if there was something wrong with my arcade machine that I brought.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yes. The arcade machine.
Yeah, I mean,
Something wrong with the board.
Yeah, there could be something wrong with the board or something wrong with the speakers or the sound hookup to
Yeah.
the board.
I will say it's still weird, like the lack of coverage on this, considering that it's fucking Street Fighter. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
You might say it shows how much confidence they had in it,
Yeah, that's true.
especially given what else was in the oven at this time. So
Those that did choose to do like a write up on it or score it were relatively unimpressed. Next Generation, known for their dedication to those communities, gave it 2 out of 5 stars, calling it, quote, neither brilliantly conceived nor sleepily dull. However, they did go on to explain that there was depth. It certainly had novel ideas to shake up the formula.
This was I don't gotta get into exact dates, but this was around the time Alpha came out, right?
close enough. Yeah.
This is like summer of 95.
So like you're an arcade owner
Mm-hmm.
and Street Fighter 2 and Mortal Kombat
Yeah.
are just killing it.
Yeah.
You're raking in those quarters. And Capcom contacts you and they said, "We got 2 cabinets and you can only afford one." And they show you a picture of Street Fighter the movie and they show you a picture of Street Fighter Alpha. Which one are you more likely to
Yeah.
buy?
Also, this was after the movie was like considered a, kind of a financial failure.
Uh-huh.
So
It was
like,
after the movie.
yeah. So it's
Yeah.
like if you see like, or do you like, hey, do you want to purchase this cabinet for your, your venue that's like based off something that didn't do
Yeah.
well? Then like, probably not. So James Chen, I don't know if either of you know, fighting game
Yeah,
commentator.
I'm familiar.
Yeah, he's pretty big in the Street Fighter scene, and he definitely has lots of stories of the old days to wax poetic about.
Okay, so they interviewed him about this, and he recounts the first day those coin-out machines showed up at the arcade he frequented, overhearing the crowd outside eagerly awaiting for their try at the cabinet. It didn't take long, however, for that excitement to turn into awkward laughter. And without veterans of the franchise taking it seriously, it became easy to predict just how much time in the sun this thing was going to have. He later said he barely had a memory of actually engaging with it after. Profit-wise, it was said by Maximum to be, quote, reasonably successful. Replay's data stated that it was the 9th most popular arcade title total in the U.S. that summer, and Game Machine in Japan listed it at number 13. This is during its first 30 days. I couldn't pin exactly what would have been ranked above those spots, although several online archives that document this type of thing show its mid-90s competition at venues primarily being against, besides Street Fighter 2 so this would be Namco's Tekken 1 and Soul Edge, the progenitor to Soul Calibur, Nintendo and Rare's Killer Instinct, Sega's Virtua Fighter 2, and most notably, Midway's Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, which would see its debut in October in the coming months.
Man, was that
Ultimate? This is after Ultimate 3.
Was that the best year for fighting games, or is this year the best year for fighting games? It's really hard.
Probably that one, but slightly.
Not to mention what was outside the genre, such as Daytona USA, hell yeah, and from the Acclaim app, NBA Jam. Those also launched in arcades that summer. So,
man, of all the games you said, which one's the best?
Daytona USA.
No.
I love that game. Though Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 was kind of like the first time I got serious about Mortal Kombat. So,
yeah, it's Street Fighter 2. That's the answer.
Well, the Street Fighter 2, I don't count because that wasn't new. That was just already doing well.
Well, it was probably Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo.
Right, but even that was
94, I thought.
I thought it was 93.
I mean,
well, either way, if it's 94, that's still before. This is 95.
Super Turbo would have been right around this time, give or take a year. But
Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo was 1994.
Okay.
But also Alpha was before this, I think.
Was it?
Alpha was like June 1995.
Wow. Okay, so that I didn't have that on here, but that as well. And I honestly doubt Street Fighter, the movie, the game, was ever going to be able to gain the traction or recognition any of these did past like that what we just brought up. Past its initial couple of weeks, it soon fell below their own Street Fighter 2 Turbo, as you said, and X-Men: Children of the Atom.
Man, and that's like, look, you're your own worst enemy when you're putting out those games right next to this one. So
yeah, but the fact that Children of the Atom was even doing like better than that.
Now imagine that they called that Street Fighter 3 though.
Oof.
Yeah, no.
And to be frank though, within only years, this did predate another like coin-out boom following the music rhythm phenomenon of DDR and the evolution of 3D rail shooters, your Houses of the Dead and Time Crises. That excitedly brought casual gaming audiences back to the scene again. Well, prior to the inevitable second crash.
But we're in the third renaissance. You can play Doodle Jump on a big screen.
Yeah, we all know the current state of that landscape.
Remember when the Injustice arcade game was just the mobile game ported instead of
that
Injustice, the fighting game?
Yeah, oh my god.
That was crazy.
I remember running up to that and being like, oh, cool. Like, there's like another realm like arcade. And then I was like, I saw the layout of the buttons and I was like, what is this?
But you see, you can play the mobile game and then you can scan a QR code on the machine and then you can play with your upgraded character and all your microtransactions carry over to the arcade game. So
great.
Like I said, third renaissance.
Shifting over to the living room, Street Fighter the movie, the game, was financially a big success for the PlayStation especially. This obviously achieving momentum from its launch day status, frequently selling out with the console across electronic and department store outlets within that time window.
Honestly, if Capcom remade this arcade machine and put it out now, it would do better. This game in like a barcade would kill it.
It probably would. Yeah.
I have played this game in a barcade.
No shit.
Yeah, it's in. Well, at least it was. They may have moved it, but I the last time I played other than my arcade machine
Yeah,
that I brought with me.
that was the first time I ever saw one, like a real one.
But the last
I've
time
never seen it outside of that.
last time I ran into a different machine for Street Fighter the movie, the game was in the St. Mark's Place barcade in New York.
Huh?
Yeah.
Oh, Philly Barcade. Come on, where's your Street Fighter the movie the game? Fucking
Here's a
cabinet.
question. So Capcom, you probably don't have the answer to this. Capcom,
You don't know that?
in these days had those boards, right?
Mhm.
And like every fighting game, like the Marvel vs. Capcom and Street Fighter 3 and all them ran off of the same board.
Yeah.
That you could just like make the board and then load the game onto it and make the machines that way. Was this a separate thing or was it part of that system? I'm curious.
I guess I don't know.
It does not look like it was part of that
It
system
does
at
not.
all.
No.
So this is my off the cuff from the top of the head, take it with a grain of salt and trust but verify recollection of what their board situation was like. But I believe that Street Fighter 2 was on the CPS board.
Yeah, CPS,
and then,
that's what it's called.
And then CPS 2 ran most of these other games we were talking about, like
Yeah.
the upgraded, faster versions of Street Fighter 2.
That makes sense.
Street Fighter Alpha, Darkstalkers, a lot of those ran on CPS 2.
X-Men,
Even
Street Fighter,
X-Men.
cyborgs?
Cyberbots.
Cyberbots,
Yeah,
sorry.
I believe
Red
Damn.
Earth.
I believe, yeah. Hold on, I don't think so.
Maybe Red Earth is special.
But most of these, I believe, were on CPS2, and then CPS3 did not do very well. They didn't get enough games out there that used it. I think Red Earth was on CPS3. I think Street Fighter 3 was on CPS3.
Yeah, I knew that.
There were only like a couple other ones, and then like Marvel vs. Capcom 2 was on a different one that was meant to mimic the Dreamcast hardware, which was the Naomi board. So there were a couple of games that were on that. So that's the best of my recollection as far as like which boards they were using. So if I had to guess, I'd say probably Street Fighter the movie was on the CPS2 board because almost everything they made at the time was.
They would have shared that with us Americans.
Maybe. I don't know. I'm just guessing. That's just my best guesstimate.
So critically, however, it seemed to fare worse. This is for the console editions. We can't really summarize it with a Metacritic or OpenCritic or Game Rankings like number. But we do have a few sources to go by. The most major highlight was whether or not those even reviewing it knew it was a completely separate product than its arcade sibling. If anything, it was more of a rework of Turbo than a port of the build, like the build in those machines. This caused huge fluctuations in scores, with many journalists being unaware of the conversion. You'd read a 6 from EGM or some 7s from OPM and Australia's Hyper, a whole 85% in UK's Play Magazine, but then also a 5 by Electric Playground, a 49 in Sega's own official zine, a 1.5 star from Allgame. Response to the Saturn version was far poorer, this in part to the less powerful hardware. I can vouch for that. Even with the cool FMV sequences, they squeezed them in on there. There was excessive slowdown and wonky controls. GamePro was harsh, handling them a low grade that was rare for the publication, exclaiming that the animations were choppy, the voice samples weak, the recovery's lengthy, and the frame redrawing was unpredictable. Their change in design to make it a defensive focus ruined the pacing, and so someone else in the office then went on to say that even on the PlayStation, it had long loads, glitches, input lag, and the sprite still looked muddy.
Yep.
Maximum, back to them, wrote about the subpar digitization of the character models.
Yep.
And that it couldn't support the fluidity that was expected for the series.
What?
Conspicuous.
I mean, that's crazy, too, because you think about how this game is being compared to the fluidity of Street Fighter 2.
Yes, yeah.
Which Street Fighter 2 loved the game to death. Compared to Alpha and 3,
yeah,
not fluid.
No.
3 is potentially like the most fluid 2D fighter
what about
ever made.
1? Which, sitting down with that, seeing where we were.
Arguably more fluid than 2. Because it doesn't slow down when you do.
It does. Oh, it does.
Oh, yeah, it does. You're right. You're right. By the way, it was the bottom board from a Golden Tee 3D machine.
Hell yeah.
So not a CPS board.
See, they weren't willing to share.
Mm-hmm.
Conspicuously, a staff member at New Generation had a positive write-up on his copy for the Saturn, though not for his PS1 copy. maybe approaching it from a different, or like, like a separate angle here. He praised the roster and various modes offered, and then must have hit his head when complimenting the visuals and feel. Then later labeling the PlayStation version a misstep, maybe just could like injured, like the hardware is more powerful, and
the PlayStation version looks better.
It does.
The Saturn version runs a little bit better, but looks markedly worse. So
so personally, I couldn't really tell much of a difference in how those two games looked.
I could
tell, yeah.
So when what I will say is
did you notice the drop shadow when it said now loading?
Okay. But so when we went into the movie battle, right? The movie battle, the first scene you see is let's just be clear, on each system it is ugly. It is terrible to look at. The background is a weird color and the characters look strange on top of it. And the thing is that I think before this is my interpretation, and I'm sure you guys will disagree with me on it, but we didn't just play that fight back to back across the two versions. We played the PlayStation copy on a legitimate PlayStation that we definitely owned and had the copy of the game for.
Totally.
And then
resting on top of it.
Yeah, then we played that mode, and then we went through like another fight or two.
Yeah. And my Saturn's always hooked up.
And then we switted to the legitimate Saturn copy of the game on a legitimate Saturn that we
I actually have 3 copies of this game
Saturn.
on Saturn.
I really wanted to show you support.
Yeah, in case the first 2 break.
But because we didn't play that same scene, which looks uglier than most of the game that already looks ugly, I think we just didn't get the side by side of an apples to apples comparison.
We also played our totally legit copies on a flat screen TV. So there's a potential that these could have looked better on a legit CRT.
We're gonna get to our discussion in just a moment, but this last part I want to get through. So Bob Mackey, and not that Bob Mackey, but Bob Mackey of US Gamer, said it's now.
No, that's that Bob Mackey.
He started US Gamer?
Yes.
No shit.
That is that Bob Mackey.
That's awesome.
I believe.
I
know he's
I didn't know of him until like the One Up IGN. Like
he worked for Joystick.
Was it? Oh, was it Joystick? I know he was there when like One Up I think went kaplooey. Right?
I was also there when Joystick went kaplooey.
Yeah.
He's not a good omen, that dude. But
he has not spoken highly of his time at IGN either, but a lot of people have gotten out of that.
No, but I
don't, so
I
sympathize with him.
I think it might be the same Bob Mackey, because he did work at a couple different places.
Awesome. Well, I probably first came across him from, it was Something Awful Goon.
Yes, also the host of Talking Simpsons, very popular podcast.
I love that podcast.
Just in case you don't know who we're talking about.
Yeah. Well, he runs the Talking Simpsons network, because they also do a whole bunch of shows.
Yeah.
I forget the What a Cartoon one as well. They're great. Very deep like research on like animated films and series. There's spin-off ones for Futurama and King of the Hill and whatnot. Anyhow, it's a plug. So he said that he referred to it as like one of the worst launch titles for the system, and I named a couple earlier, but that statement might hold true when compared to the other games that were available to pick up that eventful day. There was Battle Arena Toshinden,
Toshinden, and I was just
certainly
thinking,
didn't age well.
No, but I was thinking, I mean, we'll get there, but it's like if you're looking for a fighting game on launch, that one was probably better than this one. So
I don't think so. I think that game sucks.
It probably does.
It's like I think it blew everybody's minds because it was 3D and whatnot, but it's just like that game is chugs and is slower than this one. In my opinion,
Bob,
I think Battle Arena Toshinden 2 was more revered, but
not to go back to it, but it is the same Bob Mackey.
Shit, all right. I should have known. That doesn't sound like that common of a name, but So there was this Battle Arena Toshinden, which and then Rayman and Ridge Racer. Those are probably the standouts. That's like this wasn't those. What else was there?
Was Crash Bandicoot a launch title?
No. Yeah. There was a port of NBA Jam resurfacing again. I don't really think I sat down with the rest of these. I don't know what the fuck Keelik the DNA imperative is.
It's a Soul Calibur game. You said Keelik.
Oh, yeah.
I have no idea what that is.
Serious.
I have no idea.
I suppose I cannot test this theory. But anyway, forget all that. Where do we lie with our evening spent between both the Street Fighter the movie, the game, the D-make for PlayStation / Saturn, and Street Fighter the movie, the game, arcade form. As I doubt any of us have, like, Well, first, real quick, you've seen these at Barcade. Did you play on them there as a curiosity?
I probably played one round at the Barcade.
Okay.
Of obviously the arcade version,
Yeah,
not
yeah.
the console version. I had never played the console version before yesterday on
Alright.
on our totally absolutely.
Did you ever see one of these in the wild,
God,
Austin?
no.
No, I never have either.
I've
Alright.
barely seen I've only ever seen like Street Fighter 3 in the wild once.
Oh.
And it was when I went to Barcade with you in New York. We
So,
played it.
so
Or
yeah,
in Canada.
if it was with me, then it was probably the same Barcade that I'm talking about that had the game
Okay.
as well.
So I had one thing in my notes, and Austin, if you'll do me the honor, the insert coin sound for
on.
the Street Fighter the movie the game
Is amazing.
is one of the greatest things you'll ever
Alright.
hear.
I'm going to edit this in, but I'll play through the mic just
Yeah.
so I know where to edit it.
It sounds like it's manipulated to be longer than what a grunt is.
Mm-hmm.
So, naturally the rest of our night was just like, and you can mash on that too to make it even better.
Yeah, you mean just keep on putting
Yeah,
in
yeah.
more quarters? Yeah,
Oh,
of course.
yeah, sorry, yeah.
We weren't like hitting a button to make that sound. That would be preposterous. You got to put quarters in the arcade machine.
All right, so we'll start with that one. Who wants to give their...
I have played Street Fighter 2 in, I would say, half of its versions on actual arcade hardware.
Yeah.
I've played Street Fighter Alpha. I have played Street Fighter 3. I beat you in Mortal Kombat, remember that?
The thing was broken.
I've played Killer Instinct. And I said last night, this is somewhere between Mortal Kombat 1 and Killer Instinct in terms of quality.
Okay.
I think
It's better than Street Fighter 1.
Yeah.
For sure. I think that there was a moment. We started with the arcade version,
Yeah.
and there was a moment where I had the night trap thing,
Oh, yeah. You're like,
or
maybe
even what we
everybody
did
was...
with this movie where I was
Yeah.
playing it, and I was like, this is not nearly the worst fighting game I've ever played.
Yeah.
It I can do a fireball and a Hadouken comes out.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like chaining things together, kind of. I'm having a good time.
Yeah.
It doesn't look bad for like the scanned sprites like Mortal Kombat. I was like, this is all right.
When did the facade start?
When we plugged in the PlayStation.
Yeah, I was about to say that too. So, I'm going to be very brief because I don't have a lot of points of comparison in terms of, the Street Fighter family, like I do for some other fighting games, but specifically Mortal Kombat. But I actually didn't think the arcade version was that bad. I hated both of the PlayStation and the Saturn version. We should say there was a room full of people, and we could kind of rotate around and there was some entertainment to be had, but we did not spend nearly as much time once we
right. I mean,
made the change.
I should
over.
say when I say not nearly the worst fighting game I've ever played, when you list off that list and you say Ultimate Marvel versus Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3.
Yeah.
I'm assuming we're
That was Killer Instinct, Virtua Fighter 2,
X-Men Children of the Atom, Killer
Yeah.
Instinct, Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, Street Fighter Alpha, Virtua Fighter 2,
Yeah.
Tekken.
the original
blows.
Soul Calibur.
The original Soul Calibur.
Darkstalkers was in there, I think.
Darkstalkers.
Mhm.
This is markedly worse than
Oh, yeah.
everything I just named.
Mhm.
But was it better than Way of the Warrior? Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Was it better than?
How much Rob Zombie or White Zombie?
I said this. That's a positive.
I think I'm with you on that entire assessment.
Yeah.
It's a totally serviceable game. By contrast, should I just go right into the console versions?
Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
So
Let's
yeah, by contrast, it's
into
the thing that I had to proclaim out loud, just out of sheer amazement at what we were playing, was that in presentation, especially when you're doing the versus mode, a lot of things look like they're ripped right out of Super Turbo, right? Or just whatever the
Mhm.
latest SNES version of Street Fighter 2 was that you played, except there are loading times between everything. There's a
Yes,
lot of
that there are.
There's a lot of slowdown whenever you kind of
Yep.
do just about any move.
That there is.
There's for those who are a little bit more into the genre, there's pre-block from almost the entire screen, which means if somebody starts whiffing a move, like they're just like punching the air, and you are, let's say, not all the way on the other side of the screen, but close and just holding back, you are stuck blocking. You cannot walk backwards, right? Like, it doesn't matter where you are. You have to wait until they are done mashing that button against nothing in the air before you can start moving again. Or you can jump back and then it'll let you again. But it's like, it's so stupid. And then like, so all of this, it's like, it is just a worse package of Street Fighter 2. Like and this is what you have to play on the PlayStation. It's like Street Fighter 2 with load times and worse art, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like the background, the very famous backgrounds of Street Fighter 2, like the Chun-Li stage with the dude choking the chicken, or like the elephants in Dalsum stage, or the flags waving in the background of Ryu's stage. It's like, yeah, they're like 2-3 frames, but it's fine. They're made that way.
Oh, it was.
They're not blurry photographs downscaled, and then it's just dudes on a boat waving at 2 frames, but you can't tell that they're people because it's a photograph that's been digitized and downscaled so many times that it just looks like blotches. Somebody like spilled ink on your screen.
Wasn't it also the PlayStation version that when the music track ended, the game had to freeze to load it again from the beginning?
Yes.
Yeah.
But also,
oh my God! Yeah. That
also,
did
as
happen.
fellow former guest Matt Nudaboom noted, why, if you're making a video game that is, let's say, 99 seconds, you're fighting for 99 seconds.
Sure.
Number one, and you can't fit in memory a song long enough for 99 seconds. Number one, don't like loop it into the next round, like restart the music when the next round starts.
Right.
But also, why would the like 45-second music track fade out? Why would you fade out your... Because that's the thing. It didn't just pause to restart. It faded out into a pause to reload the music track. And there were times where we were playing
That's
where we
slick.
thought that the match ended, like the timer ended or something,
Yeah.
and the music would fade out and then cut out for a second, and we would just stand there, and then it would go do 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 do, and then we'd be like, oh, we're still fighting, and then go back to fighting each other.
But yeah, then also we had the hit pause is so long, right? So it's like you make them, you either hit them or get them to block it. It is so long that you can see exactly how bad that attack animation actually is.
Oh yeah, you pointed that out.
Or just like how bad the sprite looks. And also it's like you mentioned there were like 600 to 800 frames of animation per character.
I think that's the arcade one.
I know.
Oh, okay.
and I knew that because I would have been very surprised if the number is anywhere close on the console versions. But it doesn't surprise me at all for the arcade version. It's like, yeah, it animated pretty well. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, I think we were looking at like several thousand for Street Fighter 3, right? By comparison,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, but there were like, what, 20 per character? PlayStation. Guile's kick was just him standing and then him kicking.
Yeah.
It was like 2 frames. I think there might have been a thing where his knee was kind of bent,
Yeah.
maybe 3 frames, but that's being generous.
Closing thoughts.
It's the console versions are such dog shit.
Yeah.
But still not as bad as Way of the Warrior. So that's my
How
metric.
dare you?
That's my metric for like one of the worst fighting games I've ever played.
Also, what's that? Was this a CDI game or whatever? It was the
The Rise of the Robots.
that one.
Was
It's better than that too.
Oh yeah, the one with the Brian May soundtrack.
The Queen, like, yeah.
See, that's better. That's what you should use. The Brian May soundtrack from the Robot game is better than the Rob Zombie soundtrack from Way of the Warrior.
Oh man,
Because he's just like, I was in Queen. They never let me do it like crazy solos,
Yeah.
so I'm just gonna shred on guitar for 10 minutes straight.
The funniest thing about Rise of the Robots, I know this is like not to get distracted, but it's so funny when you go to punch and it's because the music, I guess they blew their memory budget on the Queen song for the menus and the opening cinematic. So when you're in the game, it's dead silent. But Steel punching Steel because it's a robot fighting game, and it's just like it sounds like the dryer's broken. It's
Yeah.
so bad.
But yeah,
There's a lower bar for fighting games than Street Fighter the movie, the game.
I agree.
We did it
based on a true story.
We did it. We did it in a really good trajectory because we played Street Fighter 1 and we were like, ugh, you know?
Yeah.
And then we played 2 and then we were like, hell yeah. And then we played Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo and we were like, hell
That's
yeah.
where, yeah.
And then we played Alpha and we're like, hell yeah. And then we played 3 and we're like, hell yeah. And then we played the arcade version of this and we're like, eh. And then we played the PlayStation
And we were
version,
like,
and then the PlayStation version, we're like, and then we played the Saturn version, and by the time, like, people
We played
were,
the Saturn version for like maybe like
yeah,
10 minutes.
people
We're
were
like-
falling asleep. Andrew's like, turn this shit off. This sucks.
And then we played Street Fighter 6 and Mortal Kombat 11 afterwards.
No, well, then we played Darkstalkers for a
Oh,
little
yeah, yeah,
bit,
yeah.
and then we played, But no, the console versions of this are, I could see in a world where I just bought a PlayStation.
I guess that would be
And
exciting.
I had no, that's not true. Because if I had a sleepover and I just bought a PlayStation, I would pull out my Genesis, my 6-button controllers, and Street Fighter 2 Championship Edition, and play that with my goddamn friends.
Yeah, seriously, if you had this game and Street Fighter 2 for either SNES or Genesis, you would just play Street Fighter 2.
So I
Yeah.
remember getting a GameCube for my birthday with Smash Melee, greatest day of my life. But we only had 2 controllers, and I remember having like a sleepover, like a party, and then we wanted all of us to play Melee, but we couldn't, so we ended up hooking the N64 back up and playing Smash, the first one, just because.
Melee doesn't
the 4
support 4
controllers.
people. It's 1v1. Right?
yeah, they took items out and everything.
Yeah, that's
That's
crazy.
you're like
And
that's
they
the game that
also-
only has 4 characters, or
Yeah.
They also reduced it down
One
to 4
stage,
characters.
yeah.
Yep.
There's like 6.
They just patched in Yoshi last year, I heard.
Yeah. If I don't know, if I had like sold my Genesis and Street Fighter 2
Then
and
maybe
bought a
you'd be upset.
PlayStation and had this, I don't think I would be the most pissed off kid in the world, but I was also stupid back then. So like, it's bad. It's bad. And it doesn't look like the movie. That's the thing. The movie is
Uses
fun looking.
shots or stills from the movie, and like
It does,
Yeah.
but not really, right? Like they look like shit. The movie is fun looking.
it is.
We covered that in our last episode, and it's a ton of fun.
Production design is
And
great.
part of the charm of the arcade version of this game is that it looks like the movie.
Seeing the like those costumes,
Those
and
look
everything,
like the
yeah.
costumes and the people. Like Guile looks like Jean-Claude Van Damme doing a flash kick, and that's awesome. And
Yeah.
Jean-Claude Van Damme doing a sonic boom, and that's awesome. He was on a lot of cocaine. But this just looks like you put like the Photoshop filter on, and they're just like, how many pixels do you want to turn this very high quality photo of your family into? And you're like, I don't know, like 12.
How many more
16.
colors? How many more colors do you think they needed to properly capture the look of that?
Too
movie?
many. At least double.
Andrew, what do you think?
Basically that.
Yeah,
It's
I'm kind of with.
yeah, I mean, I am surprised actually how unanimous the
Mm-hmm.
feelings were on that game, because the 3 of us are hardly ever unanimous on anything video
That's
game.
true.
But yeah, it was hard to walk away with any other opinion really. It's like
Yeah.
these are fine. The PlayStation ones are a worse Street Fighter 2 with load times.
Yeah,
and like
we
yeah.
certainly didn't walk away with like contempt, like when we played the CDI and 3DO fighting games. So
No.
yeah,
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
In a world where Street Fighter never existed
Mhm.
and Mortal Kombat was like the starter of the genre,
yeah,
and then Street Fighter the movie was Capcom's answer to
right on the
making a Mortal
precipice.
Kombat,
yeah.
it's not a bad Mortal Kombat clone. I mean, technically it's a bad Mortal Kombat clone because it plays like Street Fighter, but
yeah.
it doesn't look, the arcade version, let me be clear, the arcade
Yes,
version
yeah.
doesn't look
I think we-
awful and doesn't play that awful. It's fun. I had fun playing it. There were fun times, and
Yeah.
then we turned on the consoles,
Yeah.
and those were trash.
And that's when we turned our backs.
They were
yeah.
really bad with long load times and weird music that faded out in the middle of a match.
The confidence or lack thereof from Capcom became clear when they also put out their, as you brought up, Austin, their multimedia Street Fighter title based off the animated film that covers the events
Street
of
Fighter
2.
2, the interactive movie, I believe I said it was called.
Yes, yeah, and this is in just months following the release of this. Although this was only in Japan. Besides, the live action side of things was always more targeted as Westerners anyway. That and the arcade climate tragically wasn't what it once was here, which is why those PS1 and Saturn versions needed to sell domestically, and thankfully they did okay. Well, thankfully for the devs, consumers had better shit to invest in playing on the new hardware than this. Internally, the general tone was kind of bleh from our publisher as well. Alex Jimenez, design support at the USA division, was scrutinized during each of the project's development for being too negative when seeing their spending and comparing what they had in relation to what they were chasing. Quote, Mortal Kombat has already done this system, and they've done it way better than us. That's some tough love, but I guess he ain't wrong. Just referring to the live, the
Did they, though?
of... Yeah.
Well, does Mortal Kombat 3 look better?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
1 and 2.
Those people look like they actually belong in those scenes.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
You're talking about cohesion versus like raw fidelity.
Like the tech.
I mean, like, look, that cage in the foreground of the...
That was sick. Loved it. Why did nobody do that when you make a fighting game? Put something in front of the people playing the game.
So Street Fighter 3 does that in a few stages,
It
but
does.
but only very small elements. There's like a table or
Nah,
something.
dude,
Like in a
put barbed
market
wire
scene.
right over my character so I can't see it.
So, Randy, could you repeat that quote again about them doing what Mortal Kombat already does?
Mortal Kombat has already done this system, and they've done it way better than us.
Do you think every fighting game developer keeps saying that every time they try to do the story mode?
Hey, Burn industry, get on it. I like playing fighting games alone because I'm bad at them, or with somebody on the couch so I can hit them physically when they beat me. Chris Tang, a member of the team, echoed the sentiment that the arcade edition was still an improvement over what Capcom Japan had built. It may not have appealed to those looking to play competitively, but it was a cute novelty and impressive for what Incredible Technologies has been able to produce in the past. Darryl Williams knew the undertaking was going to be challenging. The mark wasn't hit, though he commended the U.S. crew in their work. Melgosa and Hodgkinson told Polygon via their interviews the limitations they faced were a factor. That and a sequel was never discussed. Telling for the game world and the IP. Just think of the endless iterations each entry has out there, right? They regained their footing with more Golden Tee stuff. Stepping away from third-party deals, Melgosa claiming that on multiple occasions, Richard and Elaine could have simply sold the company, but chose to continue pursuing their passion instead. They
chose to continue pumping out Golden Tee and making buku bucks.
They weren't strapped for cash, so why not?
You ought to see how much bigger their second house was.
Yeah.
Reflecting on the experience years later, there doesn't appear to be any animosity between all the folks involved, which is nice. And while you can see the PS1 or Saturn copies on various lists of bad games, mostly the term I would use to describe its place in the industry is forgotten. And almost worse fate, honestly. The last time it would pop up in the news was when in October of 2018, the distribution rights were acquired by Liquid Media Group in Canada. Not really sure why. It likely came as part of a package with other Acclaim products following their closure, because this was Acclaim co-published those versions of the game. And Acclaim, another subject that we covered. They published. I guess I should say that for these in North America. If I didn't mention that earlier, not in Japan. Japan, they were Capcom.
Yeah.
Incredible Technologies. They're still around. And significantly larger these days than when our story was set. There's 30-something employees, is now around 200.
How many of them are accountants now?
100.
Do they still have 16 accountants, or is it 100? Is it an even split?
Of course, their focus seems to have steered in the direction of casino-style machines.
Of course.
Slots, video poker.
It's either that or Chuck E. Cheese these days, and they know which one makes more money.
I don't know what Keno is. I'll bet it's just as gross.
Keno is like long-form roulette. You go to a casino, and there's like a dude with like a megaphone in the corner, and he has a board, and it has like the numbers 1 to 100 on it. I've never played Keno, so this might be wrong.
Okay.
But I've seen it. And he has a board with the numbers 1 to 100 on it, and you just go up to him and like give him $5, and you say like 32, and then like in 15 minutes he goes on the loudspeaker and he's like, the Keno results are 33, and you go, fuck.
So it's also like bingo or like
it's like a combination of roulette and bingo.
Okay.
It's like, what if I wanted to play bingo, but I wanted to do it over the course of also playing the rest of the casino games, and I also wanted it to suck and lose me money.
Traditional bingo that's not a drinking game is stupid. That game sucks. You don't do anything. You sit. I guess you don't roulette either.
Is bingo the drinking version good?
Yeah, because I don't mean that like it's not based around numbers. You have to make up your own rules. Like
it's based around whatever beverage you have with you.
Well, I meant like if you're watching. So we used to do it for E3. Remember?
Yeah. Oh, you're talking about like just okay.
Yeah. Which
gotcha.
Doesn't have to be drinking related, but
laying it out on a bingo board makes you drink less. So you just come up with rules and then drink whenever one of those rules hits.
Yeah. So Incredible Technologies, they did at one point join forces with Geist Studio and Space on digital Wii shovelware. So there's that. This was like 2008 or 2009ish. They had to capitalize on that train.
Yeah, listen, they're making casino games. These people are nothing if not trend chasers.
yeah. Good point. That's very true. And as far as our Treasured series goes, we're obviously in agreement that it hasn't gone anywhere. Even these failures, didn't slow them down. As Street Fighter 3, the proper follow-up fans were begging for, was announced in September of 1996 for an official release in Q1 of 97. I guess I did have that in here. And I'm going to guess there was some overlap in that development cycle too. But Street Fighter would... happily live on, healthier than ever. This despite MK reigning supreme on and off throughout the generations. And what I mean is that their success switches back and forth. It's kind of funny. Mortal Kombat's dark period would happen soon too. I guess around the 3D shit.
No, I would say they coincided. A lot of people would call that era.
It's the late 90s.
Up to the release of Street Fighter 4, they would call that the dark ages for fighting games. And there's an asterisk there because plenty of stuff came out in that time, including Guilty Gear stuff and things like that. But
Marvel vs. Capcom 2, is that?
Yeah, Marvel vs.
Capcom.
Smash
Melee, obviously.
There's always exceptions. And there's Soul Calibur 2 came out. But people did refer to that as the Dark Ages, and it also coincides with when Mortal Kombat was at its lowest. So
yeah, Smash Melee is my favorite, but it's obviously running a different race here.
But there was no Street Fighter, and as we all know, Street Fighter is the only important fighting game. If Street Fighter's doing bad, then everybody's doing bad. It doesn't matter if Melee came out or Soul Calibur 2 or
I don't know
Guilty Gear XX or whatever the fuck you're talking about. Or Melty Blood Actress Again Current Code. Remember that game?
Yeah.
Great game.
It's a great title. Rolls off the tongue.
Yep. Under Night in Birth Late EXECL-R. That was after that. No, it was the 2010s.
Fortunately for us, 2023 appears to be the year for both. It doesn't matter where you stand. Street Fighter 6, as I stated in the previous episode, has recently been enjoying critical and commercial commendations, as well as the upcoming Mortal Kombat 1 is looking pretty sweet. We'll find out for sure next month in September. Can't wait.
Future top 10 recipient of Hot Buttons.
Oh, I guess
2023
these will both
Game of the Year. Woo.
These will each get discussed more thoroughly another time. But
we don't know about Mortal Kombat 1 quite yet.
But good chance.
Come on.
Street Fighter 6 will be on the top 10, or this podcast won't exist.
Although
I'll quit.
The one thing I only briefly touched on this last.
It's so good.
Well, yeah. But I was saying that Street Fighter. Some might say Street Fighter 5 was also kind of a dark point as well.
Not like this period was, and
no.
Street Fighter 5 is like when you stub your toe in your mansion.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
And they kind
it's
of
like a dark point.
It's
a dark point in an otherwise golden era.
But also, I don't know if you mentioned it on air, Andrew, or off, but once 6 was out, people fled.
Oh yeah, you can watch if you go to this is actually really funny. Go to Steam charts and then type in Street Fighter 5 and then watch that cliff happen where everybody stops playing it, and you can identify the exact moment that Street Fighter 6 launched, and then those people never returned.
Do you think there's more people concurrent players of Street Fighter 4 than 5?
No. And that's partially because the online is even worse in Street Fighter 4, so it's not totally fair.
Okay.
But I don't know.
There's probably more people playing that collection that the two,
just by the nature of if people might be more likely to do a throwback tournament of 4 than
Yeah.
they ever would
Yes.
5
I
because
would agree with that.
because 6 is like almost a direct replacement of 5,
Yeah.
whereas 4 is kind of its own.
That's
thing.
kind of like with Smash Ultimate to the Wii U one. Like it's,
Yeah, so
Yeah.
like people
Yeah.
dropped Brawl and 4
Yeah.
for Ultimate, but they keep playing Melee.
hell
like-
yeah, they do.
Likewise, there are regular tournaments for Street Fighter 2 and 3
Oh,
every,
yeah.
every year.
Totally.
And they will run 2, 3, and 6. 4 is more rare. 5
Yeah.
is going to be almost dried up now.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
That's what I expect.
but yeah, so I that says something to the longevity
Yeah,
for those games.
Street Fighter 4 is like the Brawl of Street Fighter. What you
Okay.
said, right? I agree with that.
Nowadays, our interactive tie-ins are more or less viewed as an oddity. Discs are sought by online collectors with complete in-box Saturn copies going for about $50 to $80, and the PlayStation copies for over $100. Get at it. The cabinets have almost like disappeared entirely, with the exception of yours. It's in great condition.
Oh yeah, I know.
And from what I could tell, there was only just a single wide run of them. So if you do come across one out there, consider yourself lucky, I suppose. Like they didn't do like any other print run like past that, like
Mhm.
that first one.
No, the reason I know what board it was built on was because I found a forum thread of people who own these.
Really?
Yeah, of just
That's
like an
where they went.
ongoing thread of them talking about what parts they need to buy to keep them running because so few of them exist and they can't just use old ones to
Yeah.
repair new ones
So
anymore.
if you find yourself one of those barcades, drop a quarter in there if you're curious. You probably won't have another opportunity. I highly doubt OneUp is going to reissue these.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although if they did, I would buy one.
They should do it as like a part of the like a collection with other Street Fighter games, but then would you have to relicense the actors? Like
Maybe.
like
They'd also have to
license-
acknowledge that they
likenesses?
made the misstep of that movie too. Like
That's true.
yeah.
They want that buried.
Arcade one up Mortal Kombat ripoff machine. It's just all the bad ones.
Yeah, that would be funny.
Yeah.
Hey, I did say last week, Capcom stood behind the movie more than Nintendo did the live action Mario movie. Like you ask Nintendo, they'll be like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and if Nintendo had made a Mario game based off that movie, it'd probably be sick as shit. You know what I'm saying?
Somebody mod the movie.
Yeah.
It's just the Blade Runner adventure game.
Yeah.
With Mario.
Yeah.
So that's
Just
it.
John Leguizamo's in it.
That's the end of the Street Fighter the movie, the game, the episode, and the Street Fighter the movie, the episode, the game, the episode, the movie, the game, the episode, the fighter.
Based on a true story.
Yeah, based on a true story. So thank you guys seriously for sticking through. These were dense ones to write together. Originally, it was just going to be a single script, but then it just kept growing. So, and this fucking shit has been occupying space in my damn head for what feels like an eternity now. So I'm happy to finally get it out. For research, I owe Polygon so much for the assistance here. I believe the original article that I pulled many quotes from, okay, here we go, was Matt Leone with Alex Annell and Alex Highsmith serving as interpreters for the translated Japanese interviews. That's probably why I didn't, because it was multiple people, so I figured I'd wait in here till the end. But further credits then to Moby Games, Giant Bomb, the All About Capcom's head-to-head fighting book, nichegamer.com, Kotaku, and Wikipedia. So let's do plugs and prepare ourselves for whatever movie/movie to game will plague us again in the future.
I think the idea is Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, I think
Which they
so,
never
too.
made a game out of that movie because it was just so close to the game already. Thank you for listening. If you're listening to this one, you should go back and listen to the movie one.
Yeah.
Maybe also watch the movie
Watch
with
it,
us.
yeah.
And then we talked about a couple other things. We did an Acclaim episode you mentioned. I mentioned the voice actor strike thing. And a bunch more. We're now past 100 episodes, so
Yeah, our memories are going to start to get pretty
there's plenty to
foggy
choose
after
from,
all
and
this.
no two episodes are identical. So listen to them in any order, pick a topic that interests you, and just roll with it.
yeah.
And all those episodes are at hotbuttoncast.com. That's our website. Also, all the podcast services, iTunes, Spotify, whatever other ones are. I don't keep track. And then you can follow us on socials for information about our upcoming episodes and more. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook at HotButtonCast.
Yeah.
And
And allow us to play you out. Do the grunt, Austin.